Hey guys, tonight we're stepping quietly into the soft light of an Athenian morning. The city hums awake beneath a pale sky. Olive branches shimmer faintly in the breeze, and the stones of the courtyard still hold a whisper of the night's coolness. You're lying on a woven mat, half covered by a crumpled linen sheet, when a rooster announces, far too proudly, that it's time to get up. You stretch, yawn, and remember where and when you are. Ancient Greece. No snooze buttons here, no pajamas printed with cartoon sheep, just you, a restless dawn, and a heap of fabric that somehow has to become an outfit. You probably won't survive this without a decent chiton. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment telling me your location and what time it is where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You rise slowly, rubbing sleep from your eyes as sunlight pools through the open doorway. The smell of baking bread drifts from the neighbor's courtyard, mingling with the faint tang of olive oil and earth. You wrap your arms around yourself, it's cool still, and reach for the garment folded neatly on a low stool. It's simple really, 2 rectangles of fabric, fastened at the shoulders, belted at the waist. Yet as you shake it out and feel the weight of the woven wool, you realize how much care hides in that simplicity. This isn't the age of machines or mall shopping. Every thread was spun, dyed, and woven by human hands, probably by the women of the household. Somewhere in its weave, you imagine laughter, gossip, maybe even a bit of complaining about how long this one took. You slip it over your head, and the fabric settles against your skin. Rougher than modern cotton, but not unpleasant. It smells faintly of smoke from the hearth and olive oil used to soften the fibers. You adjust the belt, cinching it tight enough to move easily. That's the humble chiton, your everyday wear. If you're a modest citizen, this single garment is enough to face the day. Light, breathable, and perfectly suited for the warm Mediterranean air. Historians still argue whether the chiton originated from older Eastern styles or developed uniquely in Greece. But either way, it's lasted centuries for good reason. It just works. Outside, Athens begins to stir. A donkey brays down the alley. Somewhere, a blacksmith's hammer rings out, a sleepy metallic heartbeat of the city. You step into your courtyard, where a fig tree droops lazily in the morning heat. The sunlight touches your bare shoulders, and you notice how the folds of your chiton catch the light. Subtle waves of cream and pale beige shifting as you move. The Greeks cared deeply about drape. Clothing wasn't sewn to fit the body tightly, it flowed. Movement itself completed the design. In a sense, you don't wear a chiton, it wears you back. A neighbor appears on the roof, adjusting her own garment, a longer version pinned with bronze fibula at the shoulders. She catches your eye, waves, and laughs softly at the sight of your uneven belt. Apparently, you're not quite the fashion icon you thought. She shouts some friendly advice, something about making sure the folds fall evenly, then disappears back inside. You grin and fix the belt. Fashion critique at sunrise. Some things never change. You wander toward the street, passing a slave sweeping dust from the steps. His tunic is shorter, cut off at the knees for ease of work. You realize clothing here doesn't just cover, it signals. It tells people who you are, what you do, even how free you might be. The wealthy might have linen chitons, imported and cool against the skin. The poor make do with coarse wool. And those of the lowest status? Sometimes nothing at all beyond necessity. You glance down at your own woolen folds, suddenly aware of where you fit in this quiet hierarchy. A breeze drifts up from the harbor, carrying the scent of salt and fish. You walk past a potter setting up his shop. He's already streaked with clay, his sleeves rolled up, or rather pinned up with a bit of twine, since sleeves aren't much of a thing. He nods, and you return the gesture. There's a shared understanding here. Clothes are tools, not trophies. The more practical, the better. Still, the subtle differences, the tighter weave of his belt, the faint pattern at the edge of his fabric, hint that even in modesty, style sneaks in. You pause at a small shrine to Hermes, touching the cool stone as you pass. The statue is draped too, stone mimicking fabric so perfectly it almost moves. It strikes you that even in art, the Greeks captured this fascination with texture and fold. Maybe that's why historians still obsess over their garments. Each crease tells a story. And yet, we barely know how they really looked in motion. Some scholars suggest most people wore uncolored cloth. Others point to paintings and sculptures hinting at vivid dyes. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. Like most things, history leaves half explained. A child darts past, chasing a chicken, laughing. His tunic flaps wildly, slipping off one shoulder. You can't help but smile. Clothes for children are shorter, freer, often hand-me-downs. They'll outgrow them before they wear out. His mother calls after him, adjusting her own peplos, that older, heavier garment folded over at the chest. You realize that even as the world changes, habits linger. Some still prefer the peplos, a nod to tradition, or perhaps just comfort. As you reach the agora, the marketplace hums alive. Vendors unfurl awnings, their movements practiced, their clothes dusty but neat. You spot a fisherman in a sleeveless tunic, ropes coiled around his arms. A woman balancing a basket of figs, her chiton belted twice for freedom of movement. A young man trying, and failing, to look sophisticated with his himation draped too precisely over one shoulder. You stifle a laugh. It's the ancient equivalent of someone trying too hard to wear their jacket just so. Fashion victims, 500 BCE edition. A shout echoes from a nearby stall. A merchant waves a length of dyed cloth, rare and pricey, boasting it came from Phoenicia. You step closer, curious. The color is faintly purple, shimmering in the sun. Tyrian, he claims, though you doubt it. Real Tyrian purple, made from thousands of crushed sea snails, costs more than most people earn in a year. Still, the hue catches your eye. Maybe imitation isn't such a bad thing. You buy a small strip, more out of curiosity than need. The merchant wraps it carefully, and you tuck it into your belt. The feel of it, smooth, luxurious, contrasts sharply with your simple wool. You can't help wondering what it would feel like to wear a full robe of such color. But luxury has its burdens. Fine clothes demand status to match. You're comfortable being unnoticed. By midday, the air grows warm. Sweat darkens the wool near your neck, and you loosen the belt a little. You pass a public fountain, splashing cool water onto your face. Around you, the crowd's garments ripple in soft waves of fabric, a moving sea of off-white, cream, and brown. A few bright splashes of color appear now and then, scarlet borders, patterned hems, but mostly it's muted tones. The simplicity feels honest, like the stone buildings rising above you. Functional beauty, the Greeks would call it. As the sun climbs, the marble steps gleam painfully bright. You retreat into a shaded colonnade, watching light drift across the floor in wide, drowsy bands. Somewhere nearby, a philosopher's voice drones on about virtue. You half listen, half doze, your fabric sticking slightly to your arms. The sound is hypnotic, like bees in a jar, steady, rhythmic, too calm to resist. You think about how even philosophers must choose their tunics each morning, and whether Socrates ever tripped over his hem while making a point. Probably. By the time you head home, the city buzzes in full motion. Cloaks flutter, sandals slap, voices rise and fall like waves. You pass an elderly man with a walking stick, his chiton patched in places. He nods politely. You nod back, feeling, in some quiet way, connected. Threads in the same fabric of a day. The sun warms your shoulders, the wool scratches just a little, and you smile at how ordinary it all feels. No armor, no grandeur, just life, stitched together in folds of simplicity. And somewhere deep in the hum of the streets, in the soft rasp of fabric brushing skin, you realize this world isn't so distant after all. People wake, dress, fuss, and laugh. Fashion may change, but mornings stay the same. A little sleepy, a little messy, quietly beautiful. The day stretches on, sunlight thickening as you wander back through the narrow lanes of Athens. The air smells faintly of olive oil, goats, and something floral you can't quite name. Your chiton clings slightly to your skin now, soft from the morning's wear. As you step into a shaded courtyard, you catch the familiar sound of wood creaking, the low thump of a shuttle, and the faint, rhythmic whisper of thread sliding through thread. You follow it, drawn like a moth to quiet industry. Inside, women are at their looms. You pause at the doorway, watching. The loom itself is enormous, taller than you are. A vertical frame of wood with dozens of taut threads stretching downward like the strings of a harp. A woman sits before it, steady hands guiding the shuttle back and forth, her movements measured and meditative. This is where every garment begins, not in a workshop or a store, but right here in the domestic heartbeat of Greek life. Each thread is a story, each fabric a memory in progress. The spinner beside her works a drop spindle, twisting raw wool into fine yarn. Her fingers dance with practiced grace. The spindle hums softly as it turns, gathering the fibers into a slender thread that gleams faintly in the light. You've seen this before. Spinning is everywhere. It's said even noble women take pride in it. Penelope, after all, spent years weaving and unweaving her work to stall her suitors while waiting for Odysseus. Spinning isn't just labor, it's virtue, patience, and, sometimes, a sly form of rebellion. You almost admire the poetry of it, delaying fate with nothing but yarn. The smell here is earthy, warm. Skeins of wool hang from pegs, dyed in muted tones. Amber, clay red, and pale green. A few lengths of undyed linen swayed gently from a nearby line, ghostly in the breeze. Linen is rarer and pricier than wool, drawn from the flax plant. To make it, you soak, beat, and comb the stalks until they yield their silky fibers. It's laborious, but the result feels cool against the skin, a blessing in the Mediterranean heat. Historians still argue whether linen was a luxury material or just a regional choice depending on access to flax. But in either case, it carries an aura of quiet refinement. A small girl sits nearby, carding wool, teasing it apart with two wooden paddles studded with wire teeth. She looks up at you, giggles, and drops a handful of fluff that drifts across the floor like a lazy cloud. You pick it up, feeling its soft resistance. It's strange to think that this delicate mass will soon become something durable enough to survive years of wear. The woman at the loom catches your eye and smiles knowingly. "Every thread remembers its hand," she says. You're not sure if that's a proverb or just a local saying, but it feels true. You take a seat near the doorway, letting the cool shade wrap around you. The repetitive rhythm of weaving fills the air, a sound both soothing and hypnotic. The women talk as they work, trading gossip about neighbors, children, and prices at the market. One mentions a new dye merchant from Phoenicia who claims to sell real Tyrian purple. Another scoffs, saying his hands were far too clean for a man who works with snails. You grin quietly. The rumor mill, like the loom, never stops turning. Nearby, an older woman inspects a roll of finished fabric. She runs her fingers across it, checking for flaws. The weave is tight and even. Impressive work. She folds it carefully, ties it with twine, and places it in a chest. You notice that even the storage of fabric seems ritualistic, like tucking away a piece of time. In a world where clothing takes weeks or months to make, nothing is wasted. Every scrap might become a patch, a bandage, or a rag to polish bronze. Fast fashion would be unthinkable here. Slow, deliberate creation is the only way. You lean back, watching the interplay of sunlight and shadow across the threads. The warp threads, the ones hanging vertically, are the backbone, unyielding and constant. The weft, passed through them again and again, is what gives color and pattern. It's a comforting metaphor, really. Life is a weave. Routine is the warp, and experience the weft. You catch yourself smiling. Maybe the philosophers should spend more time here among looms. They might actually make sense of all their talk about order and balance. Someone hums softly, an old tune. You close your eyes for a moment, listening. The rhythm of the loom and the hum of the song blend together, a kind of ancient ASMR. You imagine this sound echoing through countless homes, across generations. The gentle clatter that clothes an entire civilization. The Greeks didn't just wear their culture, they wove it daily. A sudden laugh breaks your trance. One of the younger women is showing off a newly dyed thread, holding it up like a trophy. It's bright crimson, almost garish in this muted room. "Madder root," she says proudly, "boiled it all morning." You peer closer. The color's uneven, fading at one end where the dye didn't quite take. But she's beaming, and everyone congratulates her as if she's invented fire. It's a reminder that even small triumphs, especially colorful ones, brighten ordinary days. Curiously, you notice a small clay pot set on the floor, half filled with what looks like ashes and oil. The older woman dips her fingers in it occasionally, rubbing the mixture on her hands. You ask what it is, and she laughs softly. "Makes the skin smooth," she says, "and keeps the wool from drying it out." You can't help but smirk. The world's first hand cream, perhaps? Historians still debate how much of ancient self-care was practical versus aesthetic, but clearly they weren't strangers to the idea of skincare routines. Even then, dry hands were the enemy. As the day wears on, the light shifts. Dust motes float lazily, glowing in the amber air. The youngest spinner yawns, her spindle slowing. She ties off her thread and sets it aside. You glance down at the baskets of wool around you, some pure white, some tinged with natural browns or grays. Each tone, you realize, could become a layer of meaning in someone's daily life. Undyed for humility, bright for celebration, dark for mourning. It's not just fashion, it's a quiet language woven in fiber. The loom mistress, clearly in charge, rises and stretches. "Enough for today," she says, her voice soft but firm. Threads are wound, shuttles set aside, fibers covered to keep the dust off. The hum of work fades into evening calm. You feel oddly bereft, like the end of a lullaby. The courtyard grows quieter, shadows lengthening over the stone floor. A single beam of golden light still touches the hanging yarn, making it glow like a thin flame. You stand and thank them for letting you watch. The oldest woman nods, smiling faintly. "You wear what we weave," she says simply. It's both an observation and a blessing. You bow your head slightly before stepping back into the late afternoon warmth. Outside, you notice a man passing with a bundle of reeds slung over his shoulder, perhaps to make mats or baskets. You wonder if he knows that, in a way, his weaving isn't so different. It's all connected. The threads, the patterns, the patient rhythm of creation. The city hums with invisible labor like this, quiet and enduring, often unnoticed, but essential. As you walk home, you glance down at your chiton again. The weave feels different now that you've seen its origin. Each fold carries weight, not just of wool, but of effort, time, and touch. Somewhere in those threads, maybe a spinner's laughter lingers, or a weaver's sigh. You can almost hear the loom again in your mind, its steady beat matching your steps. By the time you reach your door, twilight has begun to settle. The first stars prick the darkening sky. You sit for a while on the stone threshold, resting, thinking about how something as ordinary as fabric can hold so much life. You run your fingers over the cloth at your knee and smile faintly. It's imperfect, slightly coarse, uneven in places, but warm, familiar, and real. Maybe that's the quiet magic of it. You don't just wear history, you feel it against your skin. The next morning begins with color, quite literally. As the first rays of sunlight stretch across the courtyard, you catch sight of a cluster of women gathered near a set of clay vats that bubble faintly and send thin threads of steam into the air. The scent hits you before you reach them, earthy, sharp, and faintly fishy, the kind of smell that demands commitment from anyone who works near it. You've stumbled upon the ancient dyeing pits of Athens, where plain fabric is transformed into statements of status, devotion, or, occasionally, just vanity. One woman stands with a wooden pole, stirring the contents of a vat so dark it almost looks black. Another reaches in with a stick, pulling out a dripping length of cloth that glows faintly in the morning light, deep violet, almost regal. "Careful," someone calls, "that's expensive enough to buy a goat." You move closer, fascinated. The woman wrings out the fabric and spreads it on a line to dry. The color deepens as it meets the air, and you realize you're watching chemistry without any modern jargon, just intuition, repetition, and patience. This is Tyrian purple, or at least the closest thing the local dyers can manage. The real deal comes from crushed murex snails, thousands of them. Each one yields a drop or two of that precious pigment. The process smells atrocious, by the way. The vats must be kept warm and fermenting for days, and it said entire harbors reeked of decay because of it. You think of how modern perfumeries brag about their notes of ambergris and laugh quietly to yourself. Some luxuries have always come with an unpleasant aftertaste. Historians still argue whether Athens itself produced much purple dye or simply imported it. But either way, it became the color of power. In Greece, as in Rome later, purple whispered prestige. You lean against a wall, watching as other colors emerge from less glamorous ingredients. A pot of yellow made from saffron threads so rare they're practically edible gold. Another vat brews with madder root, turning cloth into warm crimson tones. There's also a bucket of greenish-brown liquid that smells suspiciously like vinegar. You ask about it and the dyer grins. "Onion skins," she says proudly, "and a little wine for luck." She's not joking. Sometimes ancient dyeing truly was that simple. Nature's palette, stirred by hand. As you move through the area, you notice how the colors on display tell a story of their own. The rich hues are destined for the wealthy, nobles, priests, or officials who can afford to show off. Everyday citizens stick to undyed fabrics in shades of cream, beige, and soft gray. The poor? Their garments fade until they match the dust beneath their feet. It's not just about beauty, it's a visual hierarchy. Your clothing declares your place in the world before you ever open your mouth. Nearby, a man in a short, practical tunic argues with the dyer over the price of a blue-gray dye. He gestures toward a basket of wool, insisting it's for his wife's peplos. The dyer shrugs. Indigo isn't cheap. You can't help but smile at the domesticity of it all, status debates disguised as household chores. Later, when you spot that same Hugh walking proudly through the agora, you'll know how many drachmas that shade of loyalty cost him. You step carefully between vats, the ground slick with water and streaked with pigment stains like a painter's palette. It's mesmerizing. The clash of colors, the hiss of steam, the constant motion of hands and poles. And yet, for all the labor, the result is fleeting. Sunlight dyes quickly, washing and wear faster still. You run a finger along a drying cloth and notice the unevenness of the tone. Imperfection, it seems, is part of the charm. A young apprentice beckons you over. He's holding a small clay bowl filled with what looks like crushed berries. For the cheaper dye, he explains shyly, mulberry and fig juice. It fades, but the smell's nice. You take a cautious sniff. It's sweet, almost pleasant. Not bad for temporary fashion. He grins proudly when you compliment it. In his eyes, even fleeting beauty is worth the effort. You can't argue with that. Across the yard, an older woman spreads dyed wool to dry over a wooden frame. She hums softly, the same slow tune you heard in the weaving room the day before. Her hands are stained in shades of blue and red. Even her fingernails look like small mosaics. You ask if the dyes ever wash out. She chuckles. Not really, she says. The color becomes part of you after a while. She's probably speaking metaphorically, but you notice her palms are indeed faintly purple. Maybe art leaves its mark in more ways than one. A small breeze lifts the hanging cloths, turning them into lazy banners that ripple against the sunlight. The sight is oddly soothing, a dance of color in the quiet heat. You stand there, letting it lull you, your thoughts slowing, until the whole world seems made of muted motion. Somewhere, a mule brays. A child laughs. The fabric drips rhythmically, tiny droplets tapping against the clay tiles. The sound is almost meditative. You imagine the lives tied to each shade, the white tunics of philosophers pacing beneath colonnades, the ochre robes of priests tending temples, the scarlet cloaks of Spartan warriors, though that's a story for another day. Every hue carries purpose, meaning, memory. Even the poor man's plain brown cloth whispers humility, practicality, acceptance. In a culture obsessed with balance and moderation, clothing color becomes both symbol and restraint. To dress too brightly without the status to back it up, a faux pas worse than spilling wine at a symposium. You look down at your own chiton, still a modest cream, slightly dusty now. You brush it off half-heartedly. Maybe one day, you think, you'll treat yourself to something more colorful. Not royal purple, perhaps. No one wants to smell like fermented snails, but maybe a soft terracotta or a pale blue. Something that says, I appreciate subtlety, but also, I have decent taste in pigment. Nearby, two women are deep in discussion over which color best suits the upcoming Dionysian festival. One insists on crimson, passionate, bold, perfect for the god of wine. The other argues for green, symbolic of new growth and renewal. They eventually compromise on stripes. You smile at their practicality. Nothing new under the sun. Debating outfits for parties has existed since the dawn of thread. As the morning drifts into noon, you wander toward a shaded corner where water trickles from a stone spout into a basin. There, you meet a man meticulously washing freshly dyed fabric. The water turns faintly pink as it runs off. He looks up, squinting, and tells you he's setting the color so it won't bleed later. Boil it in vinegar and salt first, he says, then rinse in clean water. You nod politely, pretending to take notes. Ancient dyeing, part art, part alchemy, all guesswork. Historians still argue how consistent these results truly were, since no surviving recipe seems to work quite the same twice. Before you leave, you notice a curious sight. A dog sleeping near one of the vats, his fur faintly tinged blue at the paws. The dyers laugh when you point it out. He likes to nap too close, one says. Now he's our guardian of color. You grin. Even the pets wear fashion here, apparently. As you walk away, the smell of dye lingers faintly on your chiton. You catch yourself sniffing your sleeve and wrinkling your nose. It's not unpleasant exactly, just earthy, like history itself. You glance back one last time at the fluttering fabrics, catching flashes of violet, gold, and crimson in the breeze. For a moment, it looks almost like the city itself is breathing color. The sunlight glints off a nearby wall, momentarily dazzling you. When your vision clears, you realize the streets beyond look duller now, muted after the riot of hues behind you. You smile softly at the irony. After spending time among dyers, the world outside looks less alive, less touched by human hands. You begin to understand why people paid so dearly for these shades. Color isn't just decoration, it's identity, emotion, presence. As you stroll back toward the main road, a vendor calls out, offering oil for keeping fabric soft, and you realize even maintenance has its own economy. Clothing, you think, is like life. It starts raw, is shaped with patience, colored with effort, and fades gently with time. You adjust your belt, feeling the sun warm your shoulders again. The city hums around you, but your mind still holds that image of the fluttering cloths, each one a story, each one someone's work, someone's pride. You breathe in the air, tinged faintly with dye and salt, and continue down the road, your plain cream chiton swaying quietly among the colors of the world. By the time you reach the outskirts of the city, the air has thickened with dust and heat. The chatter of the agora fades behind you, replaced by the bray of donkeys, the creak of wagon wheels, and the distant clang of metal striking metal. You're heading toward the docks and the fields, where the working men of Greece spend their days. Their clothing tells a different story from the flowing peploi and carefully dyed fabrics of the upper classes. Here, fabric is function first, comfort second, and fashion a distant third. You pass a group of men unloading amphorae from a cart. Their tunics short and practical, nothing fancy, just lengths of coarse wool or linen, hitched above the knees for freedom of movement. The garments cling to them in the humidity, streaked with dust and sweat. Their skin is browned from the sun, muscles outlined in a way no sculptor could truly exaggerate. You can almost feel the heat rising off their backs. If you've ever tried manual labor in summer without the luxury of breathable fabrics, you understand their minimalist wardrobe choices. There's no room for drapery here. A dock worker waves as you approach, gesturing to a pile of ropes. "Mind your step, friend," he warns, grinning. His tunic has a tear along the side, roughly sewn back together with uneven stitches. You can tell he's mended it himself. Most workers can't afford to replace garments often, so repair becomes a kind of personal craftsmanship. Each patch, each uneven seam is a quiet badge of endurance. Historians still argue whether poorer Greeks truly had only one or two garments to their name. But standing here, among the dockhands, you suspect it's not far from the truth. A gust of sea air catches your chiton, billowing it slightly. You tighten your belt as you move past stacks of crates toward the shore. The smell of salt and fish grows stronger, and soon you're watching fishermen at work, barefoot, tanned, and efficient. They wear little more than knee-length chitons, or sometimes nothing but a tied cloth around the waist. Freedom of movement matters more than modesty here. They haul nets shimmering with silver scales, the sunlight bouncing off wet skin and rippling fabric. The water sparkles, but their work looks back-breaking. One man pauses to wring out his tunic in the sea before slinging it over his shoulder. "The salt keeps it clean," he explains with a grin. You raise an eyebrow. Mostly. You decide not to test that theory. Still, the image sticks. A man scrubbing his only garment with seawater, using the ocean itself as his washing basin. There's a rough kind of poetry in it. The same sea that feeds him keeps him clothed. Moving inland, you find yourself among fields of golden wheat swaying gently in the breeze. Farmers bend low, scythes in hand, their tunics short, sometimes belted higher to stay out of the dirt. The fabric darkens with sweat across their backs. One stops to straighten up, wiping his brow with the edge of his garment. "Hot enough for Apollo himself," he mutters. You smile in sympathy. The sun in Attica spares no one. Wool might sound stifling for such labor, but the Greeks wove it loosely, allowing air to flow. And besides, sheep's wool was abundant. Spinning and weaving were homegrown industries. Linen might breathe better, but it was often reserved for those who could afford it. A few of the men wear straw hats, the brim wide to block the sun, while others simply wrap a strip of cloth around their heads. You notice their feet. Most are bare, calloused, accustomed to rocky soil. Shoes are optional luxuries. The Greek working man needed grip, not fashion. You take a step onto the field yourself and feel the warm dirt against your toes, the faint tickle of dry stalks. You can see why they prefer it this way. Nearby, a small group of shepherds rest under an olive tree, their flocks grazing lazily on the hillside. Their garments are rougher still, thick cloaks called chlamydes, woolen and weathered, fastened with a simple bronze pin at the shoulder. One of the men pulls his cloak tighter against the breeze. "Keeps off rain, too," he says. It's the Greek version of a multi-tool, blanket, coat, and bedroll all in one. Historians still debate whether the chlamys was military gear first or pastoral, but out here among shepherds, you see its practicality in full display. You suspect soldiers borrowed from shepherds, not the other way around. You sit down among them, sharing shade and a flask of watered wine. Their conversation drifts between jokes, sheep counts, and weather predictions, mostly wrong, apparently. One man mentions a fox that's been stealing chickens at night. Another swears he saw Hermes himself in the clouds last week. You listen, smiling. Their laughter blends with the chirp of cicadas. Simple talk, simple clothes, simple life. But rich in the kind of ease city people often pay poets to describe. As you sip the wine, you glance at their garments again. The colors are faded, mostly natural. Grays, browns, the off-white of undyed wool. One of the men tugs at a loose thread in his cloak, frowns, and bites it off. "Still holds," he says with satisfaction. You notice the fabric is thick enough to sleep on, but soft enough to fold easily. It's practical perfection born from necessity. You start to realize that what they wear isn't about poverty, it's about adaptability. In a world where everything is handmade, simplicity is the truest form of luxury. A sudden breeze picks up, rustling the olive branches. The shepherd's cloaks flap lightly, like wings. You think of the statues back in the city, the smooth marble heroes with idealized folds of drapery, and you can't help but laugh quietly. Those sculpted garments never show the sweat stains, the frayed edges, the faint smell of sheep. Maybe the sculptors knew and chose to preserve only the illusion of perfection. Art cleanses reality, while life wears its threads thin. As the afternoon deepens, the shepherds rise to guide their flocks home. You walk with them part way, feeling the uneven ground under your feet. The path winds past a small stream where one of them stops to refill his flask. He kneels, rinsing his face, and the water soaks into his tunic, darkening it instantly. He doesn't seem to mind. The fabric will dry as he walks. You dip your own fingers into the stream. It's cool, almost startling after the sun's weight. A dragonfly hovers near the surface, wings shimmering like glass. For a moment, the world holds still. Then someone sneezes loudly. The spell breaks and everyone laughs. One of the younger men grins and says, "Maybe Demeter doesn't like city folk in her fields." You raise your hands in mock surrender. "I come in peace," you promise. He gestures at your relatively clean chiton and smirks. "Doesn't look like you've worked much today." You shrug. "I'm doing field research." The group laughs again. Even in antiquity, bad puns get no mercy. As you part ways, the fields stretch behind you in rippling gold. The workers fade into the landscape, tiny figures moving in rhythm with the earth. Their garments blend seamlessly with the soil and sunlight, like extensions of the land itself. You realize that for them, clothing isn't just protection, it's participation. To dress simply is to belong to the work, to the world. When you finally return toward the city, the scent of the sea drifts faintly on the breeze again. You pass more workers along the road, potters, builders, farmers heading home with tools slung over their shoulders. Their tunics and cloaks are stained, torn, sun-bleached, but worn with quiet pride. They're not costumes of hardship, but uniforms of purpose. The city gates come into view, glowing faintly in the lowering sun. You pause for a moment, glancing down at your own garment. Compared to theirs, your chiton feels almost indulgent. You smooth a wrinkle absently, feeling the soft weave beneath your fingers. The air is cooling now, the light fading into amber. Somewhere behind you, laughter still echoes faintly across the fields. You take a deep breath, the scent of dust and salt and olive trees mingling in your lungs. The day has been long, sun-soaked, and full of quiet revelations. For all their rough simplicity, the working men of Greece carry their world on their backs, tools, cloaks, and the invisible dignity of labor. You step through the gate, into the twilight, thinking of them. Their garments may be plain, but their purpose glows brighter than any dye. The road from the fields winds downhill toward a quieter part of the city, where the rhythm of work slows and the hum of daily life softens into something more personal. You find yourself wandering past narrow lanes lined with small workshops, potters, cobblers, metalworkers, and spinners, all laboring behind open doorways. Here, the smell of clay, smoke, and wool replaces the sea air. The garments of the people who move through this space are smudged with their craft, each one telling you exactly what its wearer does for a living. You pause beside a potter's shed. Inside, a man leans over a spinning wheel, hands slick with wet clay. His tunic is short, tied at the waist, stained from the day's work. The lower hem is stiff with dried earth. His feet are bare, toes coated in dust. You watch as he smooths the lip of a vase, concentrating so deeply that he doesn't notice you at first. When he finally looks up, he smiles, a streak of clay across his cheek. "Don't mind the mess," he says, wiping his hands on his tunic, which only makes things worse. It's hard not to smile back. You realize how little these workers separate their bodies from their work. Their clothing absorbs the story of each task: the soot of the blacksmith's forge, the wool fibers of the spinner's workshop, the metallic scent of the bronze caster's sweat. For them, clothing isn't an accessory, but an archive of motion, heat, and persistence. Historians still argue whether tradesmen in Athens belong to a formal working class, but standing here among the rhythmic scrape of tools, it's clear they shared an identity all their own. You step next into a spinner's courtyard, where women sit in a loose circle, distaffs resting against their knees. Their garments are modest, light linen chitons belted high, sleeves rolled to the elbow. Some wear simple veils to keep their hair from catching the fibers. One woman hums softly as she draws out a line of thread, twisting it deftly between her fingers. The sound of the spinning wheel is almost hypnotic, like a heartbeat. "Linen or wool?" you ask. She smiles without looking up. "Both, but linen's kinder to the skin." Her voice is low, even, the kind of tone you could fall asleep to. You think of the thousands of hours these garments represent, the spinning, the weaving, the dyeing, the stitching by lamplight. Every thread carries a fragment of time. The irony is almost poetic. The simplest tunic on a dock worker's back has passed through a dozen patient hands, mostly women's, before it ever touches his skin. One of them lifts a finished skein, pale and smooth, and says, "This one's for the market tomorrow. Maybe some rich lady will complain it's too coarse." Everyone laughs softly. It's a gentle kind of humor, half pride, half defiance. They know their worth, even if society doesn't always show it. A young boy scurries by carrying a basket of spindles. His chiton is short and patched, the knees dirt-stained. You notice his belt is made of braided fiber instead of leather, perhaps a leftover piece from the spinner's work. "He's an errand runner," one of the women explains, "good with knots." The boy grins, proud, and disappears through a side door. Outside, you follow the winding alleys to a small tannery. The smell hits you before the sight does. Sharp, earthy, unmistakable. Tanners stand waist-deep in vats, stirring hides in murky liquid. Their tunics are sleeveless, the better to withstand the heat, and many wear scarves over their mouths to block the stench. You can almost feel the sting of the air in your throat. One man glances over, noticing your wrinkled nose. "Smells like money, friend," he says with a grin. "Or shoes." You can't argue with that. Leather was precious, used for sandals, belts, harnesses, and armor. But making it was no glamorous task. The dyes, the smoke, the constant moisture, all left marks on the tanner's clothing. Their garments look permanently stained, almost as if dyed by the very labor they perform. It's here you spot a curious sight, a small rack of leather scraps cut into strips. For laces, the tanner explains, and sometimes we sell them to tailors. The rich like to use leather cords for their belts. You picture the elegant citizens you saw in the agora, their polished sandals and neatly fastened cloaks, and realize how far these scraps travel from that to vanity. Historians still debate whether these tradespeople considered themselves artisans or mere laborers. The distinction, you realize, probably didn't matter to them. Their pride came not from status, but from mastery. The perfect stitch, the smooth curve of a pot, the even twist of spun thread. And their clothing, though plain and functional, spoke of that mastery more truthfully than any jewel or emblem could. As the afternoon light begins to fade, you wander toward a communal oven where the smell of bread fills the air. A group of women gather around the hearth, aprons tied over their chitons, faces flushed from the heat. The aprons are simple rectangles of cloth, tied at the waist with cord, sometimes dyed a faint red or blue. You can tell they've been washed countless times. The color has softened to something gentle, almost sleepy. One of the women hands you a piece of bread, warm and fragrant. "Don't just watch," she says. "Eat." You take a bite. It's coarse, chewy, perfect. Crumbs fall onto your tunic, and you brush them away too quickly, earning a chuckle. "Careful," she says. "That's your dinner escaping." It's moments like this that remind you clothing and comfort are never far apart. These aprons and work chitons, for all their plainness, carry a kind of domestic grace. They protect, they hold, they belong to a world where labor and care intertwine. One woman points to a patch on her apron, a lighter square of fabric roughly sewn in. "Burned it on the hearth last week," she admits. "Didn't have the heart to throw it away." You nod. The imperfection feels honest, even beautiful. In a world where every garment is handmade, repair isn't shameful. It's a kind of quiet love. As night begins to gather, the workshop streets take on a softer glow. Oil lamps flicker through open doorways. The clinking of metal fades into the distance. You walk slowly, your own chitin brushing against your legs, feeling the texture of its weave, smoother than the workers, but made from the same ancient logic, simplicity, breathability, function. A group of young men pass by, laughing, their tunics shorter than fashion dictates. You overhear one joke, "Don't worry, it's ventilation, not vanity." They dissolve into laughter. You grin. Even in antiquity, clothing inspires teasing, trends, and tiny rebellions. You pause one last time at the edge of the street, looking back at the workshops. The air smells of wool and smoke, but the world feels alive in a different way than the agora or the fields. These garments, made and worn by working hands, tell the truest story of all, the one about persistence, craft, and the invisible threads connecting every life. A stray cat weaves between your legs, brushing your ankle. Its fur leaves a faint tickle against your skin. You glance down. It's sleek, silent, wearing no clothing at all, and yet somehow perfectly composed. Maybe there's a lesson in that too. You chuckle softly to yourself. The ancient Greeks got close, you whisper, but the cat perfected simplicity. As the cat disappears into the shadows, you take a long breath, letting the sounds of evening settle around you. Somewhere nearby, a loom still hums faintly, the shuttle whispering back and forth. You imagine thread becoming fabric, fabric becoming form, and form becoming part of someone's life. The thought is strangely soothing, like the rhythm of breathing. By the time you step back into the main road, twilight has deepened into velvet blue. The first stars begin to flicker above the rooftops, and a soft breeze cools your face. You think of all the garments you've seen today, each one different, each one honest. Work may soil them, time may fade them, but the people inside them remain quietly, enduringly human. You pull your own cloak around your shoulders as the air cools, feeling the faint weight of it settle like an old friend. The fibers scratch just a little against your neck, reminding you that even comfort has texture. The city hums softly in the distance, and for a moment, everything feels woven together. The work, the fabric, the people, and the night. You wake to the sound of waves again, though this time they're gentle, lapping rather than crashing. The city still sleeps in half shadow, but a faint blush of dawn lingers on the horizon. You've wandered back toward the harbor, where merchants and sailors are already stirring. If yesterday showed you what Greeks wore to work, today you see what they wear when the work is done. How leisure, comfort, and pride dress themselves once the sun softens and the body rests. The docks hum softly, not with the frenzy of trade, but with the low, lazy talk of men waiting for their ships to depart. Some are wrapped in short cloaks, chlamydes again, but finer than the shepherd's ones, dyed in muted blues and ochres that catch the morning light. They lean against barrels, hands tucked under their cloaks, eyes half-lidded in the sea breeze. Sailing today? You ask one, a middle-aged man with a beard flecked in gray. He shakes his head. Tomorrow. Today I rest. His cloak slips slightly from his shoulder, revealing a sleeveless linen tunic underneath, soft and well worn, like something saved for days of ease. You sit beside him, feeling the sun slowly warm your back. Around you, men mend nets or sharpen tools, but without urgency, just the lazy motions of habit. Even labor takes on a different rhythm when the day isn't meant for toil. One sailor hums a low tune as he threads a needle through a torn bit of cloth. "We do our own repairs," he says with a wink. "Otherwise, the sea takes it all." You nod. Whether mending sails or tunics, Greek men seem always to have one eye on endurance. You follow a footpath inland again, through quiet streets that slope upward toward the gymnasium, a social hub where men train, bathe, and debate philosophy, often all before lunch. The building is open air, columns framing a sunlit courtyard. Inside, a few men are stretching, their tunics slung casually over benches. Some wear light exomis, a one-shouldered garment that leaves the right arm free for movement. Others are already stripped down to the basics, skin glistening with oil. The scent of olive oil mingles with dust and stone, a strangely clean smell. A young athlete tosses a discus, his body twisting gracefully. You flinch, half expecting the disc to fly dangerously close, but it lands perfectly in the sandpit. "Not bad, eh?" he says, grinning. His short chiton is belted high, giving him full range of motion. Helps to have the right outfit. You smile, knowing athletes today would agree. The Greek ideal wasn't just strength, but harmony, body and garment moving as one. Historians still argue whether athletes always competed nude or only during certain periods, but the truth probably varied. Modesty, it seems, was as flexible as the fabric itself. You wander toward the edge of the gymnasium, where a few older men sit under an awning, discussing politics or philosophy, hard to tell which. Their himation cloaks are draped neatly, falling in precise folds across their laps. One of them gestures animatedly, and the fabric ripples like water. You can't help noticing how deliberate it all seems. Clothing, for these men, is an extension of thought, calm, composed, balanced. The body, one of them says, is the vessel of reason. His friend smirks. Then my vessel needs more wine. Laughter ripples through the group. Even philosophy has its limits before breakfast. You stroll on, past an olive grove where a small picnic is already underway. A family sits on woven mats, passing around bread, figs, and cheese. The women wear long peploi, their shoulders fastened with bronze pins that catch the sunlight. The fabric, soft linen, dyed a gentle saffron, moves in folds as they reach and gesture. You can see how easily function melts into grace. The men's garments are simpler, short tunics for comfort, but they've each brought along their cloaks, folded neatly at their sides. Leisure doesn't mean carelessness. Even here, presentation lingers. A little girl runs by chasing a butterfly, her miniature chiton belted crookedly, one shoulder slipping loose. Her mother laughs, but doesn't fix it. "She'll learn," she says, tearing bread for the child. The sight feels timeless. You think of how, even now, a parent might say the same thing about a child wearing shoes on the wrong feet. Some lessons, it seems, take patience and practice, especially the art of looking effortlessly composed. The breeze carries the smell of honey and wild thyme from nearby hills. You follow it, leaving the grove behind until you reach a hilltop shrine overlooking the sea. A few worshippers climb the steps, carrying offerings. Their clothing is neat but not grand, white tunics, clean and pressed, tied with narrow belts. You realize this, too, is leisure, not indulgence, but ritual, a break from the daily grind to offer gratitude or hope. An old woman approaches the altar, her gray hair braided neatly under a light veil. She wears a modest peplos with faint blue stripes near the hem, a small clay figurine cradled in her hands. "For Athena," she murmurs. Her fingers tremble as she sets it down. You catch the faint shimmer of tears in her eyes. Grief or reverence, you can't tell. When she turns away, she smiles faintly. "The gods notice when we make an effort," she says, "even with old fabric." You nod, struck by her quiet dignity. That thought lingers as you head back toward the city center, where the agora is transforming for the evening. The work stalls are closing, but others are opening. Food vendors, musicians, storytellers. Men and women stroll through, wrapped in lighter garments now that the heat has waned. You spot one couple sharing roasted chestnuts, their himation and peplos brushing lightly as they walk. The man's cloak is a deep maroon, neatly folded over one arm, and the woman's dress glows faintly golden in the lamplight. It's a small, perfect harmony, color meeting motion, gesture meeting fabric. A flute player sits nearby, his instrument shining in the light. His clothing is simple but spotless, as though he's chosen his outfit for performance. A crisp white tunic, hem-stitched with a faint blue thread. "It's lucky," he says when you ask. "Music sounds better when the fabric behaves." You suspect he's half joking, but when he starts to play, the sound is so clear, so soft, that you almost believe him. Evening deepens. The agora fills with voices, laughter, the clink of cups. Wine flows freely. You settle at a low table where a few men recline on cushions. One waves you over. "You're just in time," he says, pouring a cup. His tunic is dyed with indigo, the hue fading near the seams. A subtle sign of wealth, though he wears it casually. "Sit, eat, talk," he says. "We've done enough work for 10 lives." You smile and accept the invitation. As you sip the watered wine, you notice how the folds of the garments around you create a kind of unspoken rhythm, relaxed but composed, casual but not careless. Leisure, it seems, still demands a kind of artistry. The Greeks, even at rest, can't quite resist elegance. You shift slightly, adjusting your chiton to match their ease, and one of them grins. "Ah," he says, "you're learning." A warm breeze moves through the agora, stirring the fabric of every tunic, cloak, and veil. It's a shared moment of quiet motion, simple, human, beautiful. You think of how much of life is measured not in grand events, but in these soft pauses. The feel of fabric on skin, the whisper of wind, the comfort of knowing you've earned your rest. As the night grows deeper, the stars rise in a slow shimmer above the rooftops. Around you, conversation fades into the gentle murmur of contentment. The Greeks understood something modern life often forgets. Leisure isn't escape, it's rhythm, the soft note that makes the song of living complete. You lean back against the wall, eyes half closed, letting the air cool your face. Someone laughs nearby, someone else hums a tune. You think of the sailors waiting for morning, the athletes oiling their arms, the families picnicking under olive trees. Every thread of their garments, every fold, stain, and stitch carries this same quiet joy. The art of being alive, not just busy. The city sleeps slowly, like a candle burning down. You wrap your cloak tighter, breathing in the mingled scent of smoke, salt, and thyme. Tomorrow, the world will spin again with labor and heat. But for now, for this brief, shimmering moment, everything is still. Morning breaks again over Athens, warm and golden. The hum of the marketplace is already rising, but today you turn your steps toward the quieter districts, places where wealth shows itself not in noise, but in refinement. You're about to discover how the upper classes of Greece dress, not for work, but for status, comfort, and subtle artistry. If the farmers and dockhands wear their purpose, the elite wear their identity. Every fold, every dye, every clasp of metal tells the world exactly who they are, or at least who they want you to think they are. You find yourself walking along a marble-lined street near the Acropolis, where grand homes sit behind tall gates of wrought bronze. Servants sweep the thresholds, their own garments plain and practical. A young woman steps out from one of the doorways, her peplos glowing white in the sunlight, pinned neatly at her shoulders with gleaming golden fibulae. The fabric falls in long, fluid lines that sway as she moves, linen, likely imported from Egypt, finer than anything you've yet touched. The Greeks adored drapery, not tight tailoring, and her garment proves why. Every fold becomes a living sculpture. She catches your curious glance and smiles faintly, the kind of smile that says she knows exactly how elegant she looks. "It's cool in the morning," she says, adjusting the folds of her himation over her arm. "But by midday, I'll wish I'd worn less." You laugh softly. The sun spares no one, not even those who dine with philosophers. Her husband emerges behind her, a tall man with silver in his beard and a calm air of authority. His chiton reaches his ankles, a sign of wealth since longer fabric meant more material, and more material meant money. Over it, he wears a carefully draped himation, heavier than hers, dyed a deep reddish purple. Not the imperial Tyrian hue reserved for royalty, but close enough to make a statement. "A good dye," he says when he notices your gaze. "It took 6 weeks to achieve this tone." You nod appreciatively. The art of dyeing, you realize, is a science of patience. The famous purples, reds, and blues of ancient Greece came from plants and shellfish, costly, fickle, and laborious to extract. Historians still argue whether the recipes were guarded secrets or freely shared among artisans. But either way, the process was grueling. You imagine vats of crushed murex shells, the pungent smell, the long boiling hours, and think how odd it is that something so luxurious could begin in such a mess. Inside their courtyard, shaded by olive trees, the couple sits for breakfast. A servant pours diluted wine into shallow cups. The man's cloak folds neatly around his knees. The woman's peplos gleams like moonlight. They speak of the day's events, the price of grain, the latest speech in the assembly, the weather's effect on olive oil trade. You realize that for them, clothing is more than comfort, it's performance. In Athens, how you drape your himitation can matter as much as what you say in public. You wander on, your sandals whispering against smooth stone. Ahead, a group of young men laugh near a fountain, their chitons cinched loosely with braided cords. Theirs are shorter, mid-calf length, scholarly but not severe. You overhear fragments of conversation, philosophy, poetry, gossip. One leans against a column, cloak draped carelessly but beautifully, as though randomness were a kind of art. You can always tell a Stoic, one of them jokes. They fold their himation too neatly. The others laugh. Even philosophers, it seems, can't resist fashion critique. Near the fountain, a tailor's apprentice waits with a bundle of garments over his arm, newly finished by the look of their crisp folds. Deliveries for the Prytaneon, he tells you, meaning the public hall where officials dine. His tunic is simple, undyed linen, but the pins on the bundle gleam silver. "We use different fasteners for different men," he says. "The higher the rank, the finer the pin." You can't help but think of modern status symbols, logos, designer labels, subtle cues that whisper, "I belong up there." The Greeks were no strangers to that language. You stop at a perfumer's stall next. Rows of clay bottles glimmer in the light, each sealed with wax. The merchant, an older man with delicate hands, offers you a small jar. "For clothing," he says, "rose oil to rub into linen. Keeps moths away, and it smells divine." You unstopper it and inhale. The scent is rich but faint, like sunlight through petals. "Does everyone use this?" you ask. He chuckles. "Only those who can afford a second tunic." Fair point. Still, you imagine the quiet luxury of garments that carry the scent of flowers instead of sweat or smoke. As the day warms, the city's wealthy begin to emerge in fuller display. You follow the sound of a procession winding toward the temple of Athena. It's not a festival day, just a civic gathering. But the Athenians rarely need an excuse to dress with dignity. Cloaks shimmer in the sunlight, sandals gleam with polished leather, and every fold of fabric seems choreographed. You notice how color itself plays a role. Men in muted earth tones, women in soft pastels, peach, sky blue, pale gold, shades that catch light without shouting. One young woman, walking arm in arm with her mother, wears a chiton of translucent linen over a deeper blue underlayer, the contrast subtle and striking. You could almost mistake her for a nymph, someone murmurs nearby. You suspect she's heard the compliment before. They say Aphrodite favors the well-dressed, her mother remarks lightly, to no one in particular. You wonder if that's true, or if it's simply something humans have always told themselves to justify beauty. As the crowd thins, you find yourself once more on a shaded path leading toward a villa outside the city. There, under a pergola, a small gathering of friends reclines at a symposium. The table is low, covered with fruit, wine, and music. The guests wear soft garments, most of them lighter versions of the city attire you saw earlier. Long chitons, fine cloaks draped loosely, sandals untied for comfort. A young lyre player strums nearby, his hands moving like water. The air hums with the scent of oil and figs. A guest waves you over, offering a cup. "You look like you could use a rest," he says. You accept and settle into the cushions. The conversation drifts from poetry to politics to, inevitably, clothing. "The Spartans wear red," one man says, "to hide blood." Another laughs. "And we wear white to show we have none to hide." The table ripples with amusement. Historians still debate how symbolic these colors truly were, but it's clear that even jokes about fashion carry cultural weight. A woman across the table adjusts her peploi and leans in. "I prefer undyed linen," she says softly. "It shows truth." Her voice has that calm confidence money can't fake. You glance at her hem, embroidered faintly with olive branches. "So even truth likes decoration," you tease gently. She smiles. "Of course. Otherwise, who would believe it?" As the sun sets behind the hills, the sky blushes the same hue as the man's himation, the color of good wine and old sunsets. The guests rise slowly, cloaks drawn close against the cooling air. The music fades. A servant clears the cups. You realize that what you've witnessed isn't vanity, it's ritual. To the Greeks, clothing was a philosophy, balance, grace, measure. Not too much, not too little. Beauty resting on order. When you finally step away, the path is lit by oil lamps, flickering gold against marble. You glance down at your own chiton, now dusted from walking, and think of all the meanings a simple piece of fabric can hold. Work, wealth, worship, wisdom. In this world, you wear what you are, but also what you hope to be. And somewhere between those two folds lies the truth of civilization itself. You breathe in the scent of olive oil, smoke, and faint perfume drifting through the twilight. Somewhere behind you, laughter rings out, gentle, unhurried, timeless. The next morning arrives with the scent of salt and olive wood on the breeze. Today, the rhythm of life draws you toward the sea, the restless blue that defines so much of Greek identity. From the city's high hills, you can already see ships scattered like tiny white shells against the water, sails billowing with the wind that carries trade, travelers, and stories to every shore of the Aegean. Athens, like all Greece, is both land and ocean, and the Greeks are as comfortable on deck as they are in the agora. To understand them fully, you must follow the sailors, traders, and fishermen who live by the tide, and see what they wear, how they work, and what the sea means to them. You descend from the city gates, taking the dusty road that winds toward Piraeus, Athens' bustling harbor. As you approach, the sounds of civilization grow louder, hammering from shipwrights, the creak of ropes, the cry of gulls circling overhead. The air smells of tar, brine, and freshly cut pine. The docks stretch endlessly, crowded with boats in various stages of readiness. Sleek triremes with rows of oars, sturdy merchant ships stacked with amphorae, small fishing vessels rocking gently near the shore. A sailor waves to you from a nearby vessel, his skin bronzed and scarred from years under the sun. His clothing is as simple as it is functional. A short chiton hitched up above the knee for freedom of movement, and a broad leather belt cinched tightly around his waist. A woolen cloak lies folded on the deck beside him for warmth during night watches. "You're not from here," he calls with a grin. You shake your head, smiling. "Then welcome to the heart of Athens," he says. "The sea feeds us, pays us, and sometimes kills us, but we keep coming back." You ask him about his clothing, curious how the sailor's attire differs from what you've seen in the city. "This?" He tugs lightly on his tunic. "Cheap linen, easy to wash, easy to replace. Salt ruins everything eventually." He gestures toward a younger man nearby, coiling a rope. "That one tried wearing a dyed tunic once. Came back from Rhodes looking like a faded fish. Never again." They both laugh. The sailors' outfits are unadorned but clever. Most wear small caps made of felt or leather to protect against glare. Their sandals are thick and strapped tightly for traction on wet planks. A few go barefoot, their soles hardened like bark. You notice that many have strips of cloth bound around their wrists, both to absorb sweat and to prevent rope burns when hauling sails. No jewelry glints here. Even bronze would corrode too quickly. Utility is everything. You walk farther down the pier, where merchants oversee the loading of cargo: olive oil, wine, grain, and pottery bound for distant ports. The merchants' garments are finer than the sailors', but still practical. Long chitons belted at the waist, often with the sleeves tied up for ease of movement. One man, overseeing the loading of amphorae, wears a broad-brimmed hat made of woven straw. "Keeps the sun from melting my brain," he says cheerfully when you comment on it. "You can tell the landowners by their sandals," he adds, pointing to his own. "Clean, soft leather, still dusted with white from the road, not salt-stiff like the sailors. We travel with goods, not the gods' tempers." A gust of sea wind flaps the sails of nearby ships. You catch a flash of crimson, a small flag tied to a mast. The sailor beside you notices your interest. "Each color means something," he explains. "Red for merchants, blue for fishermen, green for soldiers." You wonder if that's always true or if it's simply a local convention, but it fits the Greek love for symbols. Even here, amidst salt and toil, people find ways to declare identity through color and cloth. The clang of metal draws your attention toward the shipyard, where blacksmiths shape anchors and nails. The workers here are stripped to the waist, their skins smeared with soot. Their lower garments, simple woolen wraps or short chitons, are dark from years of smoke and sweat. One blacksmith grins as he catches you watching. "Not elegant enough for you?" he teases. His apprentice laughs. "He's from the city, master. Probably wears perfume." You smile, shaking your head. "Only olive oil," you reply, and they roar with laughter. You linger by the water's edge, where fishermen mend nets beneath a wooden awning. Their hands move automatically, weaving and knotting with astonishing speed. The fabric of their tunics is coarse and patched. Each repair tells a small story of endurance. "A hole never stays alone," one fisherman mutters, tightening a knot. You mend one, and its brother opens beside it. You ask if they ever wear more elaborate clothing for festivals or temple offerings. "Sometimes," he says, "when the catch is good. But the sea doesn't care how fine your tunic is. She'll take a prince or a pauper the same way." As the sun climbs higher, the harbor grows hotter, and many workers retreat into shaded taverns for a brief meal. You follow them inside one, a low stone building smelling of bread and grilled fish. Inside, men sit on benches, their chitons rolled up, cloaks hung on pegs near the door. The owner, a broad woman with salt gray hair, moves between tables, her apron streaked with flour. "You're not from around here," she says as she pours you watered wine. "Sit, eat, watch how they live." You take her advice. The meal is simple but satisfying. Bread dipped in oil, olives, and grilled sardines. The men around you speak in bursts, voices rising and falling like waves. They joke, argue about trade routes, and complain about taxes. A few talk of storms, of ships lost near Crete or blown off course to the shores of Egypt. Each story seems to carry both pride and grief. "We measure life by journeys," one man says softly. "Not all of them end where we expect." When the meal ends, the harbor slowly returns to motion. You wander along the quieter piers now, where older fishermen sit repairing sails in silence. Their garments are faded to the color of the sea itself, gray-blue, sun-bleached white, threadbare brown. Yet there's dignity in the wear, a quiet nobility in fabric softened by years of use. One man nods to you and gestures toward the horizon. "That's where the gods live," he says, "out there. We send them prayers in the shape of sails." By afternoon, the light sharpens to a metallic gleam on the water. You walk toward the end of the breakwater, where a statue of Poseidon towers above the surf. A small group of sailors pauses there before departure, each placing a sprig of olive or a pinch of salt at the base of the statue. Superstition or respect, you can't quite tell. Their clothing flaps in the wind, rough but clean, ready for the voyage. "He likes gifts," one man murmurs, touching the god's stone foot, "but he takes what he wants anyway." The ships begin to move then, oars dipping in unison, sails catching the wind. You watch as they glide out of the harbor, one after another, until they become pale specks on the blue horizon. Around you, the dock quiets, empty except for gulls and the rhythmic slap of waves against stone. You realize how cyclical life here is. Departures and returns, always in motion, always dressed for purpose. As evening falls, you walk back toward the city. The road glows gold in the fading light, and the distant Acropolis gleams like a beacon. Behind you, the harbor hums softly with its endless heartbeat of trade and tide. You think of the sailors' simple tunics, the merchants' careful folds, the blacksmith's soot-dark cloth, each an expression of survival, identity, and belonging. The Greeks understood something profound, that clothing, like the sea, adapts to circumstance but never loses its soul. You stop for a moment to watch the sun sink into the horizon, the sky turning bronze and violet. The breeze carries the faint sound of oars and laughter, fading into twilight. Somewhere out there, men sleep beneath the stars on wooden decks, wrapped in wool cloaks against the cold. Their garments may be humble, but their lives, like the sea itself, are vast and eternal. And as the first stars appear above the darkening waves, you find yourself thinking that perhaps in every thread of linen and wool, there's a story of courage, of humans daring to live between the certainty of land and the mystery of the deep. The morning arrives softer this time, with a gentle haze over the olive groves and a whispering breeze that carries the scent of sun-warmed earth. You leave the bustle of the harbor behind and wander into the quieter countryside, where farmers and shepherds tend the land as they have for generations. Here, clothing is neither a display of status nor a statement of leisure. It is practical, enduring, and intimately tied to daily survival. You notice how the garments mold to the body, adapting to movement and weather, each fold and tear telling the story of countless seasons. You pass a field where men are plowing, oxen pulling heavy wooden plows through dark, rich soil. Their tunics are short and rough, belted simply with leather cords, sleeves rolled above the elbows. The hems are uneven and frayed from repeated exposure to mud and stone. Their sandals are thick, worn, soles shaped by countless steps across hills and fields. One man pauses to wipe sweat from his brow, revealing the texture of his linen tunic sticking to his skin. He smiles briefly at your gaze. "The soil doesn't care how neat you look," he says, tossing a handful of earth back into the furrow. Nearby, women bend over the rows of crops, tending olives and grapes. Their peploi are longer, flowing over their legs, but belted high to prevent snagging on vines and brush. Some have their hair tied back with simple bands, while others cover their heads with scarves for sun protection. The fabric is coarse but breathable, linen mostly, sometimes mixed with wool. You notice the subtle differences in color. Faded blues and soft ochres dominate, the kind of hues that fade gently in the sun rather than shouting for attention. It's practicality merged with a kind of natural elegance. A young girl skips along the edge of the field, carrying a small basket of figs. Her chiton is patched in a dozen places, each mended by her mother's careful hands. She trips, but the fabric gives way rather than tearing, a testament to years of patchwork skill. She giggles and corrects her step, adjusting the folds of her tunic as if she knows instinctively how the garment should sit. The little details matter. They are the invisible threads that connect her to her family, the land, and tradition itself. You wander toward a shepherd's enclosure, where flocks graze quietly under the early sun. The shepherd's tunic is short, almost like the farmer's, but he wears a thick woolen cloak draped across his shoulders, rough spun, patched, and heavy enough to ward off the chill of early morning mist. You watch him as he tends the flock, calling softly to the animals. His sandals are sturdy and practical, soles worn thin, straps braided tightly. In the distance, the mountains rise pale and imposing, their shadows stretching across the valleys. Historians still argue whether shepherds ever wore leather leggings for protection, but the practicality of the cloak and tunic combination is unmistakable. As you move through the countryside, you notice small villages tucked between groves and hills. Women carry water in clay jars balanced on their heads, the fabric of their peploi tucked and folded carefully to allow the jars to rest securely. Some women wear simple belts around the waist. Others knot fabric at the shoulder for additional support. You see children darting between homes, their garments patched, faded, and loose, perfect for climbing, running, and endless games. There is a rhythm here, a choreography of motion that the clothing accommodates effortlessly. You pause at a village square, where a few men sit on stone benches, playing a quiet game of knucklebones. Their tunics are simple, short, belted, and lightly dusted with dirt from the roads. One of them adjusts a fold of fabric, revealing a line of embroidery at the hem, a subtle flourish that hints at personality or local style. You smile. Even in practicality, the Greeks find room for ornamentation. The debate about whether rural Greeks ever wore dyed garments is ongoing, but the occasional thread of color tells you that beauty seeps even into functional clothing. Near a well, a group of women gather to wash linens. Their tunics are wet, clinging to their forms, sleeves pushed up to the elbows. The rhythmic slapping of fabric against stone echoes softly, mingling with the water's murmur. One woman lifts a wet tunic and shakes it, droplets flying in the morning light. "Laundry day," she says with a grin. "The clothes smell fresher than we do by the end." You laugh softly. Even centuries later, some truths remain unchanged. Further along, a potter wheels clay in his open courtyard, hands coated with wet mud. His tunic is short and practical, belted tightly to prevent catching on the wheel. A strip of cloth hangs over his shoulder, ready to wipe hands or protect against splashes. You notice that his footwear is nearly non-existent, the soles hardened by years of walking across soft and rough surfaces alike. He smiles as he shapes a vase, speaking without looking up. Every stain tells a story. Every tear is a badge of work done well. You nod, appreciating the philosophy hidden in simplicity. You continue along a narrow path, dust rising with each step. The hills are quiet, save for the soft bleat of goats and the distant crow of a rooster. A group of boys runs past, their chiton tunics short, arms bare, and sandals slipping on loose stones. They shout to one another, laughing, leaping over rocks and puddles. Their garments are patched but durable, and you notice one boy's tunic is adorned with a small embroidered symbol, a star or flower, perhaps his personal signature. Even in the midst of work and play, small flourishes of identity remain. A woman tends a hearth in an open courtyard, kneeling beside a clay oven. Her peplos is tucked at the waist for mobility, sleeves rolled up, apron tied securely over her dress. She fans the fire, checking loaves of bread baking to a perfect golden crust. The smell of baking fills the air, rich and comforting. You see the sweat on her brow and the flour on her arms and tunic. Even her clothing bears witness to effort, endurance, and domestic artistry. You pause by an olive tree, leaning your back against its gnarled trunk. Sunlight flickers across leaves, creating patterns on your tunic. Around you, the villagers move in a quiet harmony, each garment accommodating their life, each fold and hem a reflection of purpose. You realize how much these simple clothes connect to survival, culture, and rhythm. The cotton or linen, the belts, the cloaks, the sandals, all part of an intimate dialogue with the land itself. As the day wanes, you notice the golden light softening the landscape. Farmers begin to return from the fields. Shepherds bring flocks closer to pen. Women gather the last water for the evening. Children chase one last butterfly before heading home. The garments of work are softened by dust, sweat, and sun, worn in and comforting, almost like second skin. You breathe deeply, the sense of earth, olive, and smoke mingling in a quiet, soothing symphony. Finally, you pause at the edge of the village, looking back at the small homes, the fields, the flocks, and the people moving through their lives. Their clothing may be simple, practical, and unadorned, yet it is perfect in its purpose. It tells stories of toil, community, endurance, and connection to the land. Every thread, fold, and stain holds memory. Even the smallest children, racing barefoot across the dusty roads, carry with them the unspoken wisdom of generations. You exhale slowly, feeling the texture of your own tunic, the way it moves with your body as you step toward the path leading back to the city. In this place, the line between fabric and life blurs. Clothing is not just protection or decoration. It is history woven in linen and wool, lived every day in motion, sweat, and quiet dignity. The evening settles softly over Athens, and you wander toward the city's temples, where devotion and display intertwine. The streets are quieter now, the sun dipping behind rooftops, casting long shadows that turn stone and marble to gold and amber. Temples are at once spiritual centers and social stages, and the garments worn here tell their own subtle stories, symbols of respect, piety, and sometimes ambition. You notice how people adjust fabric, fold cloaks, and drape himation, all in a silent conversation with the divine and with each other. You first approach a small temple dedicated to Artemis, tucked behind a row of olive trees. The steps are worn smooth, evidence of countless pilgrims' feet. Women climb the stairs carefully, their peploi longer than usual, clasped at the shoulders with gleaming bronze pins. Some are veiled, the linen soft and translucent, revealing glimpses of the layered tunics beneath. Their garments are practical enough for walking the temple grounds, yet delicate and refined, with folds that catch the flickering oil lamps inside. You watch one woman adjust a fold at her waist, almost imperceptibly, before stepping forward to offer a small clay figurine. It's a gesture of devotion, but also a subtle statement. The care you take in dress reflects the seriousness of your worship. Men arrive in a quieter procession, their chiton sleeves carefully rolled, himaton draped just so over one shoulder. Some wear sandals, others are barefoot, treading softly over sacred stones. One elder, with a silver streak in his hair, stands at the entrance, adjusting his cloak to fall perfectly in parallel folds along his chest. You notice the way the color of his himaton, a deep earthen red, contrasts with the pale stone. It's a visual cue of experience, age, and respect, and it strikes you how deliberate the Greeks were with even subtle gestures. Historians still argue whether color in religious attire conveyed social rank or purely ritual purpose, but in this soft light, meaning seems layered rather than singular. You step inside, where oil lamps flicker and the scent of incense curls around the columns. The air is cool, carrying whispers of prayers and footsteps. A group of young women kneels before a small altar, their garments drawn close, hands folded. One adjusts her veil, and the fabric falls over her shoulder in a fluid cascade, the movement almost choreographed. Their chitons underneath are pale, dyed faintly with saffron or soft indigo, showing that even simplicity can carry elegance. At a side chamber, a young man arranges offerings, bowls of fruit, small figurines, and incense burners. His tunic is belted loosely for ease of movement, sleeves rolled to the elbow. A himaton is slung over one shoulder but not fully wrapped, allowing freedom as he kneels, bows, and places the offerings with care. You notice faint patches on the garment, repaired stitches, evidence of use and resourcefulness. Even here, in the sacred space, practicality coexists with reverence. Outside, a crowd gathers for the evening rites, their movements slow and deliberate. You watch an older woman adjusting her peplos in the fading sunlight, her hands steady despite age. The folds of her garment create soft geometric patterns, almost architectural in their symmetry. She carries a small basket of flowers, their bright petals offsetting the muted tones of her dress. There is a quiet elegance to her posture, a harmony of motion and fabric that seems to ripple across the plaza. A young couple approaches, their garments in contrast. The woman's peplos is pale green with a narrow embroidered hem. The man's chiton and himitation a muted ochre, belted snugly at the waist. They move together with subtle coordination, hands brushing as they adjust folds and hems, as if unconsciously aware that the eyes of others, friends, family, fellow worshippers, will interpret even these small gestures. You notice the woman's sandals, finely made yet simple, showing that utility and beauty can coexist seamlessly. You wander to a quieter corner of the temple, where a few men sit on low stone benches, talking softly. One points out a detail in the carved frieze, gesturing with the edge of his himation. The fabric shifts in the breeze, revealing a subtle thread of red embroidery along the edge, small, almost invisible unless observed closely. It's a reminder that detail matters, and that craftsmanship in clothing reflects not just status, but an appreciation for artistry. Nearby, children play quietly, their garments shorter and more robust, patched in muted tones. One small boy tugs at his father's cloak, trying to mimic the way he drapes it over a shoulder. The father smiles indulgently, adjusting the fabric so it falls correctly. You watch the lesson unfold silently. Clothing is a language, taught from childhood, a rhythm of folds and gestures as much as threads and dyes. A priestess enters the main hall, her peplos and himation layered, white and soft, the edges finely embroidered in gold thread. Her presence commands attention, not through noise or color alone, but through a combination of posture, motion, and the ceremonial weight of her garments. The way she moves, careful and precise, transforms fabric into a signal of authority, a living statement of role and responsibility. You think of how clothing functions in both secular and sacred life, and realize the two often overlap: elegance, respect, and identity interwoven in every fold. As night falls fully, the lamps cast long shadows, and the temple quiets. Pilgrims depart, their steps measured, garments moving softly with each motion. You linger a moment longer, taking in the smell of incense, the gentle flicker of lamplight on linen and wool, and the whispered prayers that drift into the night air. Even the simplest tunic here seems invested with intention, a combination of devotion, modesty, and subtle artistry. You walk slowly back toward the city's residential streets, where the evening settles into calm. Cloaks are drawn tighter around shoulders against the cool air. Belts are adjusted for comfort as families head home. You see how the soft twilight plays over the folds of fabric, emphasizing textures that sunlight might flatten. It strikes you that clothing here is a medium, soft, flexible, alive, through which social, spiritual, and personal identity are continuously expressed. Finally, you pause at the top of a gentle hill, looking back at the temple's silhouette against the night sky. The columns are ghostly, the oil lamps twinkling like stars below. Pilgrims and worshippers fade into the darkness, but their garments leave traces in memory: the white of peploi, the muted reds and ochres of himations, the careful drape of folds and belts, all moving with intention. And as the first stars emerge above the city, you realize that the way Greeks dressed for sacred moments mirrors life itself: measured, deliberate, and deeply expressive. Even in simplicity, there is beauty. Even in utility, there is meaning. Every fold, stitch, and thread is part of the ongoing story of humanity, whispered softly to anyone patient enough to observe. The next morning rises with a gentle warmth, the kind that brushes softly against your skin and carries the faint scent of blooming oleander from the hills beyond the city. Today, you wander into the world of artisans, those skilled hands shaping wood, stone, and clay, whose clothing blends practicality with subtle signals of craft and identity. Here, every stitch, fold, and tie is a reflection of work, pride, and an understanding that movement and material must coexist. You arrive at a narrow lane where a woodworker shapes furniture under the open sky. His tunic is short, belted high at the waist to allow freedom for bending and reaching, sleeves rolled to the elbows. Sawdust clings to the fabric in thin, pale layers. His hands are steady and skilled, fingers tracing the grain of the timber as he carves delicate patterns into a chair's back. A light cloak rests over a nearby peg, folded carefully, not for warmth, but for times when he steps outside or greets a patron. You watch him pause, wipe his hands on the cloth, and smile faintly as he continues. Even here, in the midst of labor, clothing serves multiple purposes: protection, utility, and silent communication of skill. Nearby, a potter kneels beside his wheel, shaping clay into vessels that will soon hold oil, wine, or water. His tunic is short, sleeves rolled up, belt snug to prevent catching on wet clay. He wears a leather strip across his chest, perhaps to wipe hands or protect against splatters. A faint splash of clay dots his garment, a mark of labor that doubles as a badge of experience. The apprentice beside him has a similar setup: tunic shorter and coarser, patched in several places, a testament to repeated spills, hard work, and perseverance. Historians still argue whether artisans preferred natural undyed fabrics to show practicality, or occasionally added subtle colors to signal skill or affiliation. But the patterns you see suggest both truth and ornament are valued. A metalworker hammers gently at a copper plate in a small courtyard, each strike ringing softly. His tunic is pulled up and tied over one shoulder to prevent interference with the work, and his sandals are thick-soled, protecting against hot sparks. Tiny flecks of molten metal occasionally dot his tunic and cloak, creating a constellation of effort. He pauses to wipe his brow with a strip of cloth tied around his head, its color faded from sun and sweat. You notice the same thread of practicality running through every artisan's attire. The garment conforms to the body, the movement, and the environment, while silently communicating identity. Down a quiet alley, a leather worker bends over a table covered in hides. His tunic is belted, sleeves rolled, and a heavy apron hangs over the front, soft with repeated use. Scissors and knives lie nearby, and each cut is deliberate, precise. You watch him adjust the folds of the apron to protect his tunic beneath. The leather itself will eventually become shoes, belts, or straps, blending utility with personal expression. You notice a faint scent of tanned hides mixed with olive oil, a fragrance both earthy and reassuring, a reminder that clothing and craft often intersect. Children weave through the workshops, their own garments short, patched, and flexible. One boy carries a small wooden mallet, pretending to hammer beside a carpenter. His chiton is faded but neat, folds tucked and secured, giving him freedom to move and play without danger. A girl balances a basket of clay shards, her peplos tied at the shoulder with careful knots, the hem tucked under to allow swift steps. Play and learning are inseparable here. The garments reflect both innocence and preparation for future labor. You pause at a weaver's courtyard, where several women sit on low stools, threads stretched taut across simple frames. Their peploi are long, tied at the waist to provide stability, and slightly rolled to allow for mobility. Hems are clean, threads often dyed in subtle reds, blues, and ochres. The rhythmic motion of their hands is mirrored in the soft sway of fabric, the folds moving with almost musical regularity. You notice one woman's small brooch, a bronze pin shaped like a leaf, used to secure a fold of her peplos. It's functional, yes, but also decorative, a delicate hint of artistry. Nearby, a basket maker works with reeds, bending and weaving them into perfect containers. His short tunic is practical, sleeves tucked, and a small leather belt holds tools for quick access. Tiny splinters catch in the fabric, marking the garment with the story of the day's labor. You ask him about color, and he laughs softly. Red dye would not survive this work, he says. Only stains of sweat and sawdust matter here. And yet, even in this utilitarian garb, small choices, belt style, sleeve length, or knot technique, speak volumes about skill, identity, and experience. A cobbler bends over a small stool, stitching a sandal with careful precision. His tunic is worn and patched, his hands calloused. He keeps a strip of cloth tucked into his belt to wipe glue and polish. Even in this focused, repetitive task, you notice a rhythm in movement, matched by the way the garment adapts, folding, stretching, and offering protection exactly where needed. The cobbler occasionally lifts his gaze, adjusting a fold of the himation he wears loosely over one shoulder, a subtle signal of awareness and composure. You walk along a narrow lane lined with artisans, the smells of clay, sawdust, leather, and oil mingling in a sensory tapestry. Each worker's tunic, peplos, or himation adapts to their specific craft, yet all share common features: belted waists, folded hems, practical lengths, and subtle flourishes that signal identity and pride. The mixture of utility and expression is delicate, balancing comfort with function while never fully abandoning beauty. You notice how even minor repairs, stitches and patches become a form of storytelling, a way to honor past labor while preparing for future work. In a quiet corner, a sculptor chisels marble. His tunic is short, belted, and smudged with dust, while a light himation rests over his arm to protect the stone or wipe sweat. You watch his hands move with precision, the folds of his garment shifting seamlessly as he leans, twists, and steps back to observe progress. Every fold, stitch, and crease seems orchestrated to accommodate motion while reflecting discipline. His apprentice carefully mirrors these movements, adjusting tunic and belt to follow both guidance and the natural rhythm of labor. By midday, the street hums quietly, artisans moving fluidly between workspaces, exchanging tools, advice, and conversation. Even as the sun grows high, the fabric of their garments adapts, linen and wool absorbing heat, shields against sweat, folds allowing air to circulate. You reflect on the delicate balance of durability, comfort, and appearance achieved by these craftsmen. Historians still debate how strictly artisans adhered to color conventions or garment types, but observing their movements, you see that the clothing itself is part of the craft, a silent extension of skill and tradition. As the day wanes, you pause atop a small rise, looking down the artisan lane. Sawdust drifts lazily through the air, clay dust sparkles in sunlight, and garments of every kind, tunics, peploi, himation, aprons, move rhythmically with human motion. You think about how clothing mediates labor, allowing freedom, offering protection, and signaling identity without interrupting the flow of life. Even the smallest details, a rolled sleeve, a tied belt, a patched hem, carry meaning, subtle yet profound. Finally, you take a deep breath, smelling the mingled sense of effort and craft, listening to the soft murmur of laboring hands and voices. Each artisan, each movement, each fold of fabric is part of a living tapestry, a story woven from thread, sweat, and time. In these clothes, you see not only the practicality of work, but the dignity, pride, and artistry that define human endeavor. Even in the quietest of lanes, the Greeks teach that clothing is more than fabric. It is an extension of life itself. The afternoon sun is mellow, spilling golden light across the city streets as you move toward the spaces of leisure, where Athenians relax, converse, and observe one another in settings far removed from labor or ritual. Here, clothing shifts from function to personal expression, though practicality never disappears entirely. The garments are softer, lighter, and designed to flow with the body's movements, yet they carry subtle signals of taste, class, and personality. You sense immediately that in these settings, a fold or a drape becomes a statement, a gesture, or even a playful conversation without words. You enter a shaded courtyard where a group of friends recline on low couches around a table of fruit, wine, and honeyed cakes. Their chiffons are long and flowing, made of fine linen that catches the light with every movement. Over these, himations are draped with deliberate ease, allowing arms and shoulders to move freely while leaving a line of fabric falling softly over the legs. You notice small details. One man's himation has a faint embroidered hem, almost imperceptible unless observed closely. A woman's peplos is adorned with subtle patterns of geometric shapes, dyed in pale pastels. Even in casual relaxation, the Greeks invest attention in how clothing communicates identity. A musician begins to strum a lyre in the corner, the notes weaving softly through the air. The movement of his fingers is mirrored in the gentle folds of his tunic, which shifts with each motion. He is barefoot, as many do when indoors, allowing his feet to connect with the stone floor. You realize that here, comfort and grace exist in tandem. The flow of fabric accommodates both the body and the setting. His audience watches, wine cups in hand, the folds of their garments catching sunlight filtering through the pergola. A young woman adjusts her peplos to lean comfortably against a cushion, revealing the delicate layering beneath. Her chiton, light and airy, is dyed in a faint amber that complements her skin. while a himation of soft white drapes loosely over her shoulders. She smiles at a companion, and the folds of her garments ripple subtly with her movement. You catch yourself noting how every adjustment, every turn, even a gesture of the hand, interacts with clothing to create a living display. Nearby, a philosopher sits quietly, his himation folded around him with precision. Unlike the laborers you observed, his tunic is long, reaching his ankles, and the fabric is cleaner, smoother, and carefully maintained. Yet, he occasionally tucks it under his belt as he gestures to emphasize a point. The duality is striking. Clothing here signifies intellectual pursuit as well as personal discipline, blending formality with relaxed motion. Historians still argue whether philosophers preferred certain colors to denote schools or personal philosophy, but the effect is subtle, a fabric signal language legible only to those attentive enough to notice. Children play near a fountain, short tunics belted loosely at the waist, hemmed just above the knee. Their laughter is bright, echoing softly against the stone walls. One boy stops to adjust a fold of his garment, mirroring the adults he watches, while a girl tugs at the hem of her peplos to allow easier running. Even in play, the clothing adapts fluidly, balancing freedom with modesty. A group of young men sits in a quiet corner, discussing the day's lectures, poetry, and politics. Their chitons are soft linen, lightly dyed, and the himations draped nonchalantly over one shoulder. One gestures with a hand, sending a ripple through his cloak. Another leans back, adjusting his belt, revealing the craftsmanship of a woven cord rather than a simple leather strap. You notice that even small choices in fabric weight, dye, or folding convey social nuance, signaling education, taste, and sometimes even philosophical leanings. A perfumer's stall draws your attention, where the scent of rose, myrrh, and olive oil mingles with the city's air. Women drift past, adjusting peploi and himations as they pause to sample fragrances. Their garments are lighter and more ornamental than work clothes, dyed in soft hues of pink, blue, and cream. You watch a woman pinch her belt to shift a fold, revealing a faint embroidered motif along the hem of her chiton. Small flourishes like this demonstrate that leisure garments are not merely practical, they are designed to delight the senses, both visually and tactilely. You step toward a public gymnasium, where men and boys exercise. Here, clothing is minimal, short chitons belted high, exposing arms and legs for freedom of movement. Sweat glistens on skin and fabric alike, and the tunics cling or flap with motion, perfectly adapted to physical exertion. Yet even here, small variations reveal identity. One boy's tunic is slightly more refined in weave. Another wears a narrow belt carefully knotted. You notice that utility and expression coexist naturally. Function does not preclude attention to aesthetics. A courtyard tea gathering catches your eye, with women reclining on cushions, sipping diluted wine and discussing poetry. Peploi are draped lightly, allowing gestures and interaction without constriction. Sleeves are rolled delicately, hems adjusted to sit elegantly on knees. One older woman gestures with a hand, letting the folds of her garment ripple with the motion, as if the fabric itself participates in conversation. You observe the subtle choreography of movement and clothing, how each fold, twist, and drape conveys refinement and care. Nearby, a young man practices calligraphy on a wax tablet, his tunic long but lightweight. The fabric shifts as he leans forward, sleeves slightly rolled, belt snug but comfortable. You realize that the balance between practicality and elegance is everywhere in leisure. Clothing supports the activity while communicating identity and taste. Small embroidered details, color choices, and even belt knots all contribute to a silent language understood by peers. As afternoon fades into early evening, you wander toward a small theater. Actors rehearse, their garments flowing and flexible, designed to accommodate exaggerated gestures. Their chitons are dyed in soft, approachable colors, while himations are light enough to allow dramatic movement, yet substantial enough to create visual contrast on stage. You watch one actor adjust the folds of a sleeve mid-motion. It is functional, graceful, and expressive all at once. You notice the crowd that gathers to observe these rehearsals: citizens, merchants, and even some laborers who have come from the fields. Their clothing mirrors leisure rather than work, yet subtle differences in fabric, color, and drape signal their role, wealth, or taste. Children sit cross-legged near the front, tunics short, belts loose, eyes wide with curiosity. The garments accommodate attention, comfort, and mobility, all while maintaining the unspoken rules of decorum. Finally, as the sun dips behind the city walls, shadows stretch across courtyards and streets. Women gather to adjust peploi and himations before heading home. Men fold their himations and untie belts. Children tug at loose hems. You pause on a quiet street, observing the way light falls across fabrics, highlighting textures, folds, and subtle patterns. In leisure, as in work or worship, clothing tells a story, fluid, adaptable, and rich in meaning. You breathe in the warm evening air, carrying the sense of olive trees, distant food, and worn leather. And you notice how the city settles into a quiet rhythm. The folds of fabric move with the people, responding to gestures, wind, and body weight. Each garment carries layers of history, identity, and purpose, whispering stories of labor, devotion, skill, and now relaxation. Here, clothing is both companion and statement, flowing seamlessly with life itself. The evening deepens, and you drift toward the bustling marketplaces, where the day's commerce softens into a gentler rhythm. The crowd has thinned, and the merchants' voices are lower, blending with the scent of herbs, freshly baked bread, and the faint tang of fish from nearby stalls. Clothing here is functional, yet reflective of subtle social cues. Merchants, shoppers, and city dwellers all convey identity through folds, fabrics, and colors, even when haggling over a basket of olives or a clay amphora. You wander past a fruit vendor whose tunic is a soft ochre, belted at the waist for mobility, sleeves tucked to the elbows to allow ease in reaching and lifting. The cloth is sturdy yet breathable, perfect for the warmth of the day and the physical demands of stacking produce. He gestures to a pile of figs, counting carefully, while his himation drapes loosely over one shoulder, partially shielding him from the late sun. Even as he works, you notice the small details. The hem is slightly uneven, showing minor repairs, and the belt knot is tied in a neat, deliberate manner, a quiet reflection of personal style within functional necessity. Nearby, a woman adjusts her peplos while choosing a basket of olives. The folds of her garment shift fluidly with her movements, soft linen brushing her arms and legs. Her belt is narrow but sturdy, tied so that the excess fabric forms gentle pleats. She gestures toward a merchant, a small bronze pin securing the fold at her shoulder. It is practical, yes, but the subtle shimmer in the lamplight hints at care and attention to appearance. Historians still argue whether urban women preferred lighter or darker colors for shopping in public, but you can see here that choice blends function with subtle self-expression. A group of young apprentices carries trays of bread and olives through the marketplace. Their tunics are short, hemmed just above the knee for ease of movement, and some have small patches where fabric has been repaired from earlier misadventures, spilled oil, snagged bread baskets, or careless pulls. They laugh and jostle one another, the garments responding effortlessly to motion. Even as playfulness threads through their movements, the clothing maintains its purpose, balancing freedom with modesty. You pause to watch a fishmonger clean the day's catch at a small stall. His tunic is short, belted, and worn, sleeves rolled up, and a simple cloth wraps around his waist to wipe hands or protect the fabric from salt water. His sandals are thick, with soles hardened by years of standing on wet stone. You notice a small slit in the hem of his tunic, patched neatly, a testament to care, thrift, and practicality. The contrast is striking between garments designed for continuous labor and those for lighter, more ceremonial use. Yet even here, the smallest touches, belts, hems, and folds, communicate subtle aspects of identity. Across the way, a scholar strolls slowly through the market, carrying a wax tablet and stylus. His himation is long, draped with careful symmetry, the edges hanging almost ceremoniously. Beneath it, his chiton is clean and lightly dyed, the fabric soft and flowing, designed to facilitate walking and discussion without binding or irritation. You watch as he gestures during a conversation with a merchant, the himation shifting elegantly over his arm. Every movement precise, deliberate. In this public transitional space, clothing bridges the gap between work, leisure, and social performance. Children dart between stalls, tunics short, belted loosely for rapid movement. One small girl carries a basket of grapes, adjusting her peplos as she navigates cobblestones and puddles. Her garment is patched but sturdy, folded to provide both mobility and modesty. A boy beside her tugs at a sleeve, mimicking the adult's gestures and practicing the choreography of fabric and movement. Even in play, these garments carry silent lessons about propriety, function, and identity, skills learned as naturally as walking or running. You notice a cluster of women near a spice stall, their peploi dyed in muted shades of blue and ochre, tied at the shoulders with care. Their himations are loosely draped, leaving arms free to handle delicate jars and bundles of dried herbs. One adjusts her belt as she reaches for a jar of cumin, the fold forming a gentle cascade of linen across her torso. The movement is graceful, almost subconscious, yet reveals a refined understanding of how fabric interacts with both body and environment. A few merchants are beginning to pack up for the evening. One carefully folds his himation, laying it across his arm, while his tunic remains tidy despite hours of handling goods. Another tucks a small cloth into his belt, ready for any final spill or dust that might settle on the wares. You notice that even as practicality dominates, subtle flourishes, like a well-placed fold, a tied belt, or a minor decorative stitch, signal care, pride, and a quiet sophistication. Across the market, a street musician sets up near the fountain, tuning a flute. His short tunic allows freedom of breath and hand movement, and a simple leather strap across his chest holds small instruments or pouches. You watch as he gestures with one hand, the tunic lifting slightly, revealing both function and fluidity. Nearby listeners adjust their peploi or himations to lean forward comfortably, their clothing shifting naturally with the soft rhythms of music and conversation. You move to a shaded corner where an elderly storyteller rests, his long himation draped carefully over his shoulders, the folds almost theatrical as he gestures to a small gathering of children. His tunic beneath is light and breathable, designed to balance warmth with air circulation. As he leans forward, the fabric shifts gracefully, echoing the cadence of his story. The children mimic his gestures unconsciously, tugging at hems and adjusting belts as they follow the tale. It's a subtle form of inheritance, the rhythm of clothing passed from adult to child, function and form entwined. A young couple pauses to share a sweet drink from a small jug, adjusting belts and folds to sit comfortably on a low stone ledge. The woman's peplos slips gently across her legs, secured with a small bronze pin at the shoulder, while the man's himation rests lightly across his lap. Even in leisure, the garments act as extensions of the body, responding to motion, posture, and social interaction. You notice the soft interplay of fabrics, breathable linen, soft wool, and the occasional decorative stitch, all designed to communicate care, taste, and intention without overwhelming practicality. As twilight deepens, merchants and shoppers alike begin to leave, tucking small goods into woven baskets, tying fabric folds carefully, and preparing garments for the cooler evening. You pause at the edge of the market, noticing how the fading light transforms textures and folds. Coarse tunics soften in appearance, fine linens glow subtly, and the interplay of shadows reveals the deliberate choreography of cloth in motion. In this space, between work and home, practicality and subtle expression coexist seamlessly, a silent testimony to Greek understanding of clothing as both utility and communication. Finally, the marketplace empties into quiet lanes, the sounds of trade replaced by soft footsteps and murmured conversations. Tunics, peploi, and himations sway lightly with movement, still bearing the marks of the day: dust, patches, faint stains, each telling a story of work, barter, and social life. You take a deep breath, feeling the gentle cool of evening against your skin, and realize that even in this transitional space, clothing performs multiple roles: protection, expression, and connection, weaving a narrative that stretches from dawn's labor to dusk's leisure. Night falls gently over Athens, and the city takes on a softer, quieter rhythm. Streets that were once bustling with merchants and shoppers now echo only with the gentle footfalls of citizens returning home. This is the time when attire shifts again, blending comfort with warmth, modesty with practicality, and, occasionally, a touch of elegance. Evening garments are often layered, allowing for the cooling temperatures while still accommodating movement through narrow lanes, stone steps, and courtyard thresholds. You wander past a series of homes, each doorway offering glimpses into domestic life. Women carry oil lamps, their peploi adjusted to allow safe passage while holding flickering flames. Some garments are tucked under at the waist to facilitate climbing stairs. Others are rolled lightly at the shoulders for ease of movement. The fabrics are soft but substantial, absorbing the warmth of the lamp and reflecting it gently onto the surrounding stone. You notice how even minor adjustments, folding a hem, pinning a shoulder, tying a belt snugly, demonstrate attentiveness and care. Inside one courtyard, a family gathers to share the evening meal. The father's tunic is long but light, sleeves rolled to the elbows, himation draped loosely across his shoulders. He gestures with his hands, and the fabric responds fluidly, moving without restriction. The mother adjusts her peplos to sit comfortably on a low stool, securing the folds with a small pin while ensuring the layers beneath remain in place. Children sit cross-legged on the stone floor, tunics short and practical, belts tied loosely to allow freedom as they reach for bowls of bread and olives. Even in domestic comfort, clothing is a carefully balanced system. Mobility, modesty, and the subtle assertion of personal style coexist seamlessly. You step into a small garden where a few neighbors have gathered for a quiet evening chat. Women lean against stone walls, their himations draped lightly over peploi, hands clasped over folds. One adjusts a sleeve as she laughs softly, and the movement sets the fabric into a gentle ripple that catches the lantern light. Men stand nearby, tunics belted high, himations slung casually over shoulders, chatting in low tones. The garments allow freedom of gesture, whether pointing to a flowering vine, raising a cup, or simply leaning in toward a friend. It is a choreography of fabric and body, subtle and continuous, shaping social interaction without thought. A musician plays a soft tune on a lyre, the sound mingling with the evening air. You notice how the player's garments enhance their movement, the sleeves of tunics tucked or rolled to avoid interference, himations draped to balance posture and arm motion. The children, still present, adjust hems and belts subconsciously, mirroring adult gestures as they attempt to keep pace with the music. Even as the city calms, the clothing participates in the rhythm of life, responding to motion, light, and sound. Some women carry water from wells or fountains for the evening meal. Their peploi are long, but tucked and folded carefully to allow lifting and balancing of jars on shoulders or heads. The heaviest folds are distributed evenly, and belts or pins secure the fabric against slips. You notice a faint embroidery along the hem of one tunic, catching the lantern light, a subtle signal of personal care in an otherwise utilitarian garment. Historians still argue whether urban households favored such embroidery for decoration or as a mark of social identity, but here it feels both practical and expressive. A few men stroll through the streets, conversing softly, tunics lightly dusted from the day's activity, himations draped with deliberate ease. One pauses to adjust a fold over the shoulder, allowing air circulation while maintaining modesty. Another tucks a belt more tightly, preparing to cross a cobblestone alley. Even in evening leisure, gestures with clothing remain purposeful, a blend of comfort, adaptability, and subtle communication. You notice children playing quietly in alleys, chasing one another between low walls and small courtyards. Their tunics are short, hems folded to allow freedom of movement, belts loosely knotted. One girl pauses, tugging at her peplos to prevent it from dragging as she climbs a low stone. These small interactions, seemingly trivial, reveal a constant negotiation between fabric, movement, and environment, a negotiation the Greeks mastered intuitively from childhood. Near a temple courtyard, some citizens linger, offering quiet prayers or tending small shrines. Long tunics and layered himitations accommodate bending, kneeling, and walking, soft folds cushioning movement across stone floors. The garments here are both protective and expressive. The weight and drape of fabric mirrors devotion, respect, and personal intent. Even as shadows lengthen, clothing retains its function, allowing the wearer to navigate sacred space without distraction. A family prepares for the night in a small home. The mother smooths the folds of her peplos before sitting near the hearth, adjusting the himation draped over her shoulders for warmth. Children untie belts and relax hems, settling into short tunics designed for sleep or ease of movement. The father folds his long tunic neatly, draping a himation over a chair in anticipation of the cooler night air. You notice the interplay of fabric and function, warmth, mobility, and modesty all interwoven, quietly shaping the domestic evening. Some streets are now empty, lit only by the flickering glow of a few lamps. Tunics, peploi, and himations move subtly as figures pass, the folds catching and releasing light with each gesture. You realize how deeply the Greeks understood clothing as a living extension of the body, adaptable, responsive, expressive, and deeply integrated into the daily rhythm of life. Even in moments of repose, garments participate, guiding posture, protecting against chill, and framing identity. You pause atop a small hill, observing the city's soft glow below. Streets, courtyards, and fountains are quiet, yet the garments you've seen today continue their silent dialogue with light, motion, and air. Tunics flap gently in the breeze, himations ripple across shoulders, peploi flow softly with every step. These fabrics, so simple in appearance, embody centuries of adaptation, culture, and subtle artistry. Finally, as stars begin to sprinkle the night sky, the city settles completely. You take a deep breath, the sense of olive, hearth smoke, and cooling stone filling your senses. Clothing has guided the day's movement, softened the evening, and prepared the city for night. Practical, expressive, and harmonized with life itself. Every fold, knot, and drape is part of a story you've been walking through. A story of balance, continuity, and quiet beauty. The night is deep, and the city rests beneath a soft blanket of stars. You stroll through quiet streets, listening to the distant rustle of leaves and the occasional low murmur of someone returning home. In this calm, garments that have accompanied the city through day and evening now take on a gentler role, protecting warmth, preserving modesty, and allowing the body to relax. The tunics, peploi, and himations that once moved briskly with labor or flowed elegantly with leisure now drape with a languid grace, soft against the skin, echoing the slow rhythm of night. Families prepare for sleep. The mother smooths the folds of her peplos, adjusting the himation wrapped around her shoulders for warmth, the fabric soft and pliable from hours of movement. Children untie belts and roll hems to settle into short tunics for rest. Even in this intimate, quiet moment, clothing continues to guide comfort and motion. You notice the small details: the gentle folds over a child's shoulder, the careful tuck of fabric around the hearth, elements that balance protection, ease, and subtle care. Historians still argue whether nightly garments were treated as separate from daily wear or adapted directly from evening attire. But the softness of fabric and relaxed drape suggest the Greeks valued comfort above all as darkness fell. You walk past a lone lamp casting a golden glow on a stone wall. A man adjusts his long tunic and drapes a himation loosely over one arm as he returns home from a friend's house. The folds catch the lamplight in subtle ways, accentuating the texture of the fabric and the gentle movement of his steps. Even minor gestures, tightening a belt, repositioning a fold, reflect the ongoing negotiation between practicality, comfort, and self-presentation. Small pins, tied belts, and folded hems become instruments of ease, ensuring garments respond naturally to the body while providing security and modesty. Near a small courtyard, women gather quietly to exchange words before parting for the night. Peploi are drawn close, belts readjusted, and himations draped lightly to maintain comfort while sitting or walking. One woman laughs softly, tugging her garment into a gentle fold. Another smooths the fabric along her shoulder. Even in these private moments, clothing participates in expression, graceful, subtle, and responsive to both body and environment. You see how layers of fabric provide not only warmth, but also an unspoken elegance, balancing utility and quiet artistry. Children prepare for bed in small clusters, short tunics belted loosely. One boy rolls up his sleeves to climb a small stool, adjusting the hem to prevent snagging. A girl tugs her peplos to climb into a low bed, her movements shaping folds in the fabric as naturally as breathing. Play, learning, and rest converge here, and garments move with the body, adapting without conscious effort. The care with which these clothes are folded or penned reflects a culture in which fabric is an extension of human life, shaping both comfort and subtle social signaling. You pass a quiet fountain where a lone philosopher lingers, his long tunic and himation draped with calm deliberation. He gestures to the stars, the fabric flowing smoothly, responding to his posture and the gentle night breeze. The garments provide warmth and modesty, yet do not impede movement, allowing him to bend, sit, or adjust as needed. You notice the folds fall almost ceremoniously, a quiet echo of the structured day now softened by the serenity of night. Historians still debate whether philosophers of Athens prioritized simplicity over ornament in their evening attire. But here, the balance of function and elegance is unmistakable. Along the city streets, merchants pack away their remaining goods and fold their tunics neatly over their shoulders, himations adjusted to keep dust off the fabric. One pauses to check a patch on his tunic, smoothing the folds and securing a belt knot before returning home. These small gestures, often imperceptible, demonstrate attention to detail and pride in appearance, even after a long day. Fabric is both protector and partner, moving with the body, absorbing movement, and quietly narrating the wearer's experience. The quiet lanes are illuminated by scattered lamps, casting long shadows that emphasize the texture and drape of fabric on every passerby. You notice the soft ripple of a peplos in a gentle breeze, the slight tug of a belt as someone leans forward, the delicate adjustment of a himation over a shoulder. Clothing at night is intimate, responsive, and protective, supporting each gesture while maintaining elegance and ease. Even in stillness, fabric participates in life, shaping posture, movement, and interaction. Finally, you reach the city's outer walls, the stars above reflecting in your eyes. Tunics and peploi move gently with the last footsteps of the night, garments softened by hours of wear, lightened by the calm of darkness. The city itself seems draped in a quiet, flowing fabric, each street, courtyard, and home participating in a collective rhythm of folds, textures, and movement. You reflect on how clothing, from labor to leisure to evening repose, has accompanied every step, gesture, and breath, a subtle yet constant companion. As your journey through the city winds down, you feel a sense of gentle continuity. The fabrics you have observed, from coarse work tunics to flowing peploi, from draped himations to intimate evening layers, have told stories without words of labor, devotion, artistry, leisure, and quiet domestic life. Every fold, stitch, and adjustment participates in the rhythm of human existence, flowing seamlessly with movement, light, and time. Now, as the city sleeps beneath the cool night sky, the soft folds of fabric around bodies reflect the last light of day and the first whispers of night. Linen, wool, and carefully draped layers embrace warmth, comfort, and modesty. Children rest, adults reflect, and the garments themselves settle into a calm rhythm. The city breathes slowly, each fold a testament to centuries of thought, craft, and lived experience. Slowly, you close your eyes to imagine the soft rustle of tunics, the gentle sway of himations, the protective embrace of peploi, and let the calm of the night and the city's quiet clothing soothe your mind. Every thread, every fold, every movement has told a story of humanity, patience, and simple elegance. The night is deep and quiet now, the city bathed in soft starlight. You feel the gentle weight of fabric, the comforting folds of tunics and peploi, the drape of himations resting against shoulders, soft and familiar. The air carries the faint scent of olive trees and distant hearth fires, mingling with the calm hum of the city settling into rest. You imagine the small adjustments, the subtle tugs and folds, the way garments protect, comfort, and move with each breath, each gesture, each heartbeat. Even as darkness stretches across streets and courtyards, fabric continues its quiet work, shielding the skin from chill, guiding posture, and cradling motion with gentle precision. Each fold, stitch, and pin is part of the city's slow rhythm, echoing human care and intention. You picture children in short tunics, adults in layered evening garments, and the soft shimmer of lamp-lit himations on stone walls, all flowing with effortless grace. There is a gentle beauty here, in the simplicity and subtlety of daily life. Clothing is not mere fabric. It is comfort, expression, identity, and history woven into every thread. You breathe slowly, letting the soft rustle of imagined folds and draped layers carry you toward calm. Thoughts of work, Ritual, leisure, and play dissolve, leaving only the quiet companionship of cloth moving gently with human form. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let the peaceful rhythm of fabric, motion, and night lull you toward sleep. The city rests. You rest. Every fold, every layer, every gentle drape whispers, all is calm, all is gentle, and the night carries you softly into dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.